Welcome to the Sam Sales garage. Someone like me should never own a garage. It's full of ongoing projects and crap, to be honest. But here is Stowaways Tiller that I've taken off, and I just took the main bracket off this evening, and the top and bottom support plates. They've got like two stainless plates there which were mounted and bolted through the tiller, but as you can see, as I've taken them off, the whole thing is just falling apart. It's the wood sections have just sort of lost the bond, and yeah, it's just falling apart. So I've just mixed up some Wetsuit epoxy, and I'm gonna try and save this if possible. There was a mid-section which sort of fell apart in the middle as I took the main bracket off, but hopefully I can get that back on and save it. I had to use quite a lot of pressure to get that off, and this is still a pretty hefty piece of metal.
So I could have probably mixed some sort of high bond filler with this mix, just sort of not too thick, but just enough to sort of create a bit more of a bond. But West Systems works really well just mixed up like this on its own. And I was going to obviously clean up the tiller afterwards anyway.
So what I'll probably do is just glue in a load of resin on this surface, and hopefully it'll keep all these inner sections intact and give the main metal section a bit of support. So what I'll do is I'll come back to this tomorrow, and then I'll do the other side, I think. You can see it's already starting to go. I've only put that on there about 15 to 20 minutes ago, so it's already working its magic. I'm going to put this down the end there just in case any drips come off this, but hopefully not. So next day, and I've just taken off the clamps and that's the plastic off this, and this is that side is all hard. That's looking good. So I was going to go and do the other side, but I don't actually think it needs it. So to save on more epoxy mixing, which is expensive stuff, I'm just going to sand this back now and get it ready for probably a couple of coats of varnish. So I'm going to whack on some Deks Olje saturator D1 onto this tiller now. I think the wood could do with it, to be honest. It's looking a bit dry in places. I've used this before, it's pretty good. You can go absolutely mad on it on the first sort of application. Just keep soaking in wood, and then it really gives the wood in the tiller a bit of life. Now I could varnish this tiller, but varnish I just find really high maintenance, so oil is the preferred substance generally. It also doesn't make wood too bad either. Remember, the marine environment is generally speaking very harsh, so usually quite an expensive varnish is required, and even then it only lasts probably one season before you're at it again. So if I can get this open, we'll be using this. If not, probably be varnish, a cheap one, which I don't particularly want to use. Oh my god, that has been a little while in there, and that's its consistency. I'm just going to stir that up a bit. The crops have been pretty good this year. Check out the fridge. Plenty of tomatoes. Some applesauce as well. And doing a bit of foraging. This dude. I feel like my boat is turning into a workshop. I've got paint down there, and I've got sort of paint tins sort of at the back end of the cockpit, and yeah, just the signs of sort of maintenance is ongoing. So I am just about to start painting the hull. This morning I've been out and washed with the neutral solution, and washed it off with fresh water afterwards just to get rid of the suds. But I've done it really early, so the sun can just, like, it's got time to like dry up. It's meant to be a nice day today, so yeah, the temperatures have been okay. This off about between 15 and sort of 17-18 degrees during the day, but at night it's getting really cold now. So as a result, there's quite a lot of dew on the deck. So once that's all gone, once that's all sort of evaporated from the hull, then I'll start looking at mixing up and rolling on some epoxy primer. Spent pretty much probably best part of 2 days just going around filling all the little holes, and where the sort of like paint strip is, like down just under the gunnel. That was an absolute nightmare to get off, and when I was taking it off, there was quite a few sort of sections of I suppose GRP that came off, which gave it a really horrible edge. So I've tidied that up as best I can, and filled in sort of any major sort of areas which have come away. There was quite a lot of filling on the sort of starboard side, sort of transom area, so I've spent a lot of time sort of filling that up. And then obviously last night I sanded back sort of flat and smooth, ready for the paint. So yeah, I probably look about 11 or 12 o'clock. That's my estimation for getting this stuff on, so, or at least making a start.
So this probably wasn't the best place to be mixing up. However, I want to make use of the high temperature in the cockpit to warm the resin up a bit. What I'm adding here is a low temperature additive that Jotun do. The working temperature is sort of ambient temperature for applying the high build epoxy primer is about 10 degrees, or the minimum is about 10 degrees. But with the low temperature additive, and you don't need an awful lot of it, it brings that working temperature down to about 2 degrees. So we weren't likely to see any of those temperatures until the evening, but it was just a sort of like fail-safe. You only need about 100 ml of the additive per sort of 5 litre drum of resin. So my plan was to mix up the first batch and apply it on the transom. This is the very first time using this, so I only wanted to work a very small isolated area, and felt the transom was probably the best option. So I was using a sort of Jotun specified roller for applying the epoxy primer, and they do say it needs to be quite a decent thickness. And when you're rolling this stuff on, it's quite easy to get into the mode of like painting the wall at home with emulsion, but you need to kind of place it on and then just even it out so you've got a decent thickness there.
Okay, so that's the stern painted. Not 100% sure on thickness. I think I'm maybe a little bit thick in certain areas, but one thing I did notice was obviously some of the small spots haven't filled in, and probably won't until I get the second or third coat on. But it's surprising actually how much you use. And I made a little bit of a boo-boo because I looked at the 3:1 ratio mix, not the 4:1, which is in one on the side. So I just had to add that, add a little bit more of the resin in, just to increase it, but hopefully that won't affect it too much.
So not wanting to waste too much time, I got stuck into the starboard side. It was probably a little bit thick to start off with at the transom end, but sort of like a bit of a balancing act with the thinner. I did find the sort of sweet spot with the thinner in the end, which I think was about 15, between 10 and 20%, about 15%. Just enough to like give you a decent sort of working time. You don't want it to be too thick and then it's, you know, just unworkable within literally a matter of like minutes. It's nice to have a little bit of workability. If it's a bit thinner, you can do that. It's a bit tricky recording some of the stages of this because my hands are covered in, well, most of my gloves are covered in epoxy, so I don't want to get my GoPro covered in it. But you can see how thick the resin actually is when it comes out of the tub. It's really important that you mix that up properly before you start mixing up, and even if it's been sat for sort of like a day, it's just to get a mixer in on it and sort of move it around again. It's quite solid at the bottom of the tin. So I was using quite a dark primer. The top coat colour is an ice blue, but I also wanted to use grey because it sort of shows the uneven sort of parts of the hull that will need smoothing out after the application of the primer. So yeah, more sanding ahead. You'll be pleased to know.
Well, the first coat of primer is on. It's dried really well. It's been an absolutely amazing day for it. Really dry, and hopefully tomorrow will be the same, and I can get on with the second coat. I started off on the stern there with quite a thick mix-up of epoxy. I could have thinned it down a little bit more, but I just wanted to experiment a little bit with rolling that on, and it was not easy because it's because it's a chemical paint. As soon as you get it on, it's starting to dry, and it's the longest lifespan it's going to get is in the pot. So I covered that up as best as possible while I had it in the tray. The tray's got the sort of like medium kind of half-life. You kind of, so long as you've got plenty in the tray, you should be okay to just keep working it. But when it's on the actual surface of the hull, it literally, you've got about 5 minutes to make sure that you've got a decent cover, and then you just move on. One thing I did notice was if you're rolling it on and you leave a really solid line and you have to go away and mix up, if you come back, that solid line would be really difficult to get rid of. So as you're sort of progressing along the hull, if you just sort of like kind of thin it out a little bit sort of as you're moving along onto the surface that you're going onto next, and then that way there's not a huge like line, if you like, waiting for you when you come back. That was one of the challenges I had, and with that thick epoxy at the beginning, it was just such a, I mean, there was one line which I just came back to and I was like, oh, I can just like, roll that out, and I just couldn't, and I had to go and sort of make quite a thin batch of epoxy to kind of like make it run a little bit so I can make it out. But it's all sort of like lessons kind of as I'm going along. The port side was a lot better, it went on a lot quicker because of sort of lessons learned on the starboard side. But generally speaking though, the surface was good and dry all the way around, so I'm pretty confident that we won't have any issues with the first coat anyway. Okay, so behind me is the one of the chain plates covers. Just got that in there, and I am gonna open that up with my multi-tool and actually have a look at what's going on in there. my plan is actually to change all the stainless chain plates on board one at a time, and upgrade them. It's going to be a bit of a pain in the ass job, but essentially what you've got is the stainless steel chain plate there, and then you've got two backing supports, one at the top and one at the bottom. I've done a little bit of research online on this. On the Nicholson site there's loads of information, and it appears for some reason they've used mild steel backing pads, so hence the rusty looking sort of resin liquid coming out, and ultimately I think stainless has got about a 25-year lifespan anyway, so it's probably due for a change out. So let's have a look. This is a real nightmare. I thought it'd be quite easy just to take this off, but it's really embedded, so I had to use a different sort of tools to get me in there. Bloody hell. I'm just using this sort of grouting removal tool because all my other blades are done. They do not actually put up with this. There it is. Oh my gosh, you can actually see it. Wow. Interesting. That's buried extremely deep. There we are. Don't really feel like I'm getting to the point with that cutter, to be honest. So I'm gonna head back into the painting mode again. Those chain plate covers are solid, and taking me quite a long time to actually chisel away at the outer side. I've just basically exposed the lower join for where the chain plate goes onto the backing plate. The interesting thing is, what I thought was a mild steel, very rusty mild steel backing plate is what appears to be a quite well intact stainless plate. So it sort of begs the question, have these been done in the past and quite recent? The only thing that is corroding, it appears, is the actual M10. There's quite a large connection bolt between the chain plate and the backing plate, and that looks like that's the sort of rusty area, but I'm going to have to open it up a bit more and actually find out sort of what's going on. But that tool, I don't think, is the quickest job, or making quickest job of that. Maybe a mini angle grinder or something like that, something a little bit more to the point, because that's good for sort of grinding back in a sort of small area in a tight space, but I think for cutting into the actual cover, I think I'm going to need a mini angle grinder on that. So just finished the second coat, and I've actually done the last coat on the sunny side just to make sure that I didn't lose the surface temperature, which is fine today, but it's probably something to bear in mind of. You can see that side a little bit cooler. Trying not to slip over here. Mud at Pin Mill. Teamed up with Wetsuit Outlet, and they've bunged me some of this new Gill stuff. This one here has got a pretty decent fleece liner, and it's September. It's still pretty warm, and I am sweating big time. For a solo sailor, you're kind of standing on watch quite a lot of the time, and it can get pretty cold at night, and it's always important to have a decent sort of spec of clothing as well. It's sort of part of the preparation involved for that. And the last thing you want to do is to get cold and wet. It's yeah, kind of like the end scenario for me. If I'm cold and wet, then yeah, I need to start thinking about doing something about it. Must have been about 3 years old, I think, when, well, I can't actually remember when I actually first went out for the first time, but apparently I was 3 years old, and my dad took me out in his Wayfarer 17-foot Wayfarer dinghy for a weekend sail. Started spending the weekends out, just loading the boat up, and yeah, sleeping under a tarpaulin, just surrounded by, yeah, all the wildlife, and not really seeing anyone for a good 2 or 3 days sometimes, which it was pretty magic. But I just remember spending a lot of nights and days quite wet and cold, and it wasn't really any. It was very no thrill sailing, I think. Yeah, some of the jackets and stuff were a little bit kind of rudimentary, you know. It was very low budget sailing anyway, and yeah, wax cotton jackets, big heavy things, just fling one of those on and off you go. So this Gill hoodie is the Quest hoodie. It's really actually quite nice and breathes really well, so when you're walking and moving around on deck or what have you, it's yeah, it breathes. You don't sort of sweat too much, and when you're actually sat down, when you're doing like very little, it actually, you know, it does really well to keep the wind off, and yeah, it's quite nice on against the skin as well. Some of these hoodies can get quite itchy, like if you start to sweat, you know, and this doesn't do that at all, which is superb. Okay, it's Sunday. I wasn't going to do this today. I wasn't going to put the last coat on because of the weather forecast. It's quite high wind today, up to sort of 25, later on today 29, and yeah, it's overcast as well, and not particularly well. It's about 14 degrees, but it is dry. It's totally dry at the minute. Just check the surface temperature with my little laser gun. Get this out. So we're 13.7 all the way down. Looks equal on both sides. Yeah, the substrate temperature is good. So surface temperature is good. So we'll make a start with this now. I'll be getting covered up, and hopefully there won't be any drizzle or rain. Keep checking.
thankfully the weather forecast was spot on and we didn't get any rain. In fact, the cloud cover dissipated and the sun came out, which was superb. That's all 3 coats on, well, as much as 3 coats on. The next stage is going to be sort of smoothing off the hull. You can see some of the waves in the from the early sanding, so there'll be sort of longboard sanding and just to smooth off the hull, ready for the top coat. I hope you enjoy this video and stay tuned for more videos coming up soon.